Instructor Galith had trained soldiers from 200 different species over his 400 years of life. He had seen cowards become heroes. He had seen heroes break. He had seen creatures with 17 limbs learn to fight and creatures with no limbs at all learn to kill. Nothing surprised him anymore until Cadet 7, 291 that her name was Ava Delgado. Human. Female. 26 years old by Earth counting. She had arrived at the Coalition Academy on Station Threshold 6 months ago, and in all that time, she had not spoken a single word. Not one. Galith check her file again. She was not mute. Her medical records showed perfectly functional vocal cords. She had passed every psychological evaluation. She was not damaged, not traumatized, not hiding some secret injury. She simply chose not to speak. This fascinated him. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only made contact with the Coalition 15 years ago, and they were still considered strange and unpredictable by most species. Galith had trained a few dozen of them now. They were loud creatures. Usually, they laughed too much. They made jokes in combat situations. They formed attachments too quickly and fought too hard for beings they barely knew. Ava was different. She moved through the academy like a ghost. She excelled at every physical test. Her tactical scores were among the highest in her class. She worked well with others, always helping, always present. But she did it all in silence. The other cadets talked about her constantly. Maybe humans have a silent caste, suggested a Relian cadet with scales the color of rust. Like our warrior monks. Maybe she made a vow, said another, a tall Fenari with 6 eyes. Some species do that before battle. Maybe she is broken inside, whispered a Keleth named Briss, who slept in the bunk above Ava's. Maybe she is sad. Briss was the one who tried hardest to reach her. She was a young Keleth, barely adult by her species standards, with 4 arms and skin like pale blue silk. She had come to the academy hoping to prove herself, and she had latched onto Ava like a younger sister seeking approval. Every night, Briss would talk to Ava about her day, her fears, her hopes, her family back home on Keleth Prime. Ava would listen, sitting cross-legged on her bunk, her strange human face soft with attention. Sometimes she would nod. Sometimes she would reach out and pat Briss on one of her 4 hands. But she never spoke. One night, Briss asked her directly, "Why don't you talk? Are you afraid of something?" Ava tilted her head. She reached for the small tablet she always carried and typed a message, then turned the screen toward Briss. IT said, "I talk too much. I am practicing quiet." Briss did not understand. None of them did. Galith watched the human carefully over the following weeks. He noticed things that others missed. He noticed how the other cadets in her squad gradually stopped needing verbal commands from her. She would point, and they would move. She would tap someone's shoulder, and they would know exactly what she meant. She had trained them without words, built a team through action alone. This was unusual. Most leaders led with their voices. Ava led with her presence. He noticed something else too. When danger appeared in training simulations, the other cadets looked to her. Not to the squad leader, a loud Fenari named Goss who barked orders constantly. They looked to Ava. They watched her face for signs of fear or calm, and they adjusted their own emotions to match hers. She was never afraid. Not once. Galith had seen this quality before, but only in ancient warriors, beings who had survived so much that fear no longer reached them. Ava was 26 years old. What could she possibly have survived to earn that kind of stillness? He pulled her file again. Born in a place called Detroit. Worked as something called a crisis negotiator before joining the coalition military. No combat experience listed. No trauma flags. Nothing to explain the depth behind her eyes. The mystery deepened. Then came the announcement that changed everything. "Attention all cadets," the station's voice system declared one morning. "Final evaluation simulations will begin in 3 days. All squads will participate in the hive breach scenario. Prepare accordingly." The mess hall went quiet. Galith watched from his observation post as the cadets reacted. The hive breach was legendary. It was the hardest simulation the Academy offered, a nightmare scenario where cadets had to evacuate civilians from a station overrun by swarm constructs. biomechanical horrors that moved fast and killed faster. No squad had ever achieved full survival. The best anyone had managed was 60% of their team making it out. Most squads lost everyone. The point of the simulation was to teach a hard lesson. Sometimes you cannot save everyone. Sometimes you have to choose who lives and who dies. Sometimes acceptable losses are the only path to victory. Galeth looked across the mess hall at Ava Delgado. She was eating calmly, showing no reaction to the announcement. Briss was talking rapidly beside her, all four hands gesturing with nervous energy. Ava reached over and placed one hand on Briss's arm. The Keleth went still immediately, calmed by the touch. Galeth felt something cold move through his old bones. He had trained thousands of soldiers. He knew what warriors looked like before battle. Most showed fear or excitement or grim determination. Ava showed nothing. Nothing at all. And somehow, that was more frightening than anything else. The lights died at exactly 0300 hours. 50 cadets woke to darkness, alarms, and the sound of something moving in the walls. Ava was already on her feet before the first scream echoed through the barracks. She grabbed Briss by one arm and pulled her close, then reached for the emergency kit under her bunk. Around her, other cadets stumbled and shouted, confusion spreading like fire through dry grass. The simulation had begun. From the observation deck high above, Instructor Galeth watched through night vision displays as the cadets scrambled to organize. The hive breach scenario was designed to break them. It started with disorientation. It escalated to terror. It ended with choices no young soldier should have to make. Red emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in bloody shadows. The cadets could finally see each other, but they could also see the first swarm construct crawling through a ventilation shaft at the far end of the room. It was beautiful in a horrible way. 6 legs, a body like twisted metal and wet meat, mandibles that clicked with mechanical precision. The swarm had been the galaxy's greatest threat 2 centuries ago, and though they had been defeated, the Coalition kept their designs alive for training purposes. Nothing taught survival like facing a swarm construct. The creature dropped from the ceiling and killed a cadet before anyone could react. The holographic body flickered as the simulation registered the death, then vanished. First casualty. 49 remained. Squad leader Goss screamed orders, his 6 eyes wild with panic. Formation. Get into formation. Weapons ready. Half the cadets obeyed. The other half looked at Ava. She was already moving. No words. No hosetashchen. She pointed at 3 cadets and gestured toward the door. She tapped Briss on the shoulder and pointed at a wounded Relian on the floor. She made a series of hand signals that her squad had learned over months of silent communication. They understood. Within seconds, Ava's half of the group was moving with purpose. They secured the wounded. They covered the exits. They began the systematic retreat toward the evacuation point that the simulation demanded. Goss noticed he was being ignored. What are you doing? I am a squad leader. Follow my orders. Ava didn't even look at him. She simply kept moving, and the others followed her. Galeth leaned forward in his chair. He had seen this happen before, the natural transfer of leadership from the appointed to the capable. But never this fast, never this smooth. It was as if Ava's silence had become its own form of authority, more powerful than any shouted command. The next hour was chaos. Swarm constructs poured through the station, hunting the cadets through corridors and maintenance shafts. The simulation was merciless. It took 3 more cadets in the first 10 minutes. Then 2 more in an ambush near the medical bay. Ava's group lost no one. She moved them like pieces on a game board, always one step ahead of the constructs. She seemed to know where the attacks would come before they happened. When a construct burst through a wall, she was already pushing Briss out of the way. When another dropped from above, her knife was already in motion. She killed 4 constructs personally. Each time, her face showed nothing. No fear, no satisfaction, just calm, focused attention. They reached the final evacuation point with 8 survivors. The shuttle was waiting. Safety was 50 meters away. Then Briss grabbed Ava's arm and pointed back down the corridor. A small figure huddled in the shadows. A child. A Minari child. One of the civilian holograms scattered throughout the simulation. It was crying, its tiny three-fingered hands covering its face. Galeth checked his display. The Minari child was placed there deliberately. It was behind enemy lines, surrounded by construct patrol routes. Retrieving it would require going back through the most dangerous section of the station. The tactical choice was clear. Leave it. Save the squad. Complete the mission. Every other squad in the history of the simulation had made that choice. The point was to teach cadets that sometimes you cannot save everyone. Sometimes the mission matters more than the individual. Goss, who had attached himself to Ava's group after his own squad fell apart, spoke up. Leave it. It's just a hologram. We have to go. Ava looked at the child. She looked at the shuttle. She looked at her squad. Then she handed her rifle to Briss and turned back toward the darkness. No. Briss grabbed for her with all four arms. Ava, please. It's not real. Ava gently removed each hand from her arm. She looked into Briss's eyes for a long moment, something passing between them that needed no words. Then she walked back into the nightmare. Alone, Galeth stood up from his chair. In 40 years, no cadet had ever gone back for the Minari child. The scenario was designed to be unwinnable. The child could not be saved. It was a lesson in accepting loss, but Ava didn't know that. Or perhaps she didn't care. He watched her move through the corridors, silent as shadow, avoiding constructs through what seemed like pure instinct. She reached the child in 4 minutes. She picked it up gently, cradling it against her chest like something precious. Then the constructs found her 0.5 of them, surrounding her on all sides. No escape route. No backup. Simulation death was certain. Galeth prepared to log another lesson learned. Then something unexpected happened. Briss appeared at the end of the corridor, followed by 3 other cadets. They had come back. Against orders. Against logic. Against every survival instinct they possessed. They had come back for their human. And now they were all going to die together. The constructs moved closer. 5 killing machines made of metal and nightmare, their mandibles clicking in the red emergency light. They surrounded Ava and her squad completely. No gaps. No escape. Briss was shaking. All 4 of her arms trembled as she raised her weapon, knowing it would not be enough. The other 3 cadets who had followed her back pressed together, their different species united by the same fear. This was the end. Ava stood in the center. The Minari child clutched her chest. The holographic infant had stopped crying. It seemed to sense that something important was about to happen. Galeth watched from the observation deck, his old heart beating faster than it had in decades. He should stop the simulation. It had gone wrong somehow, broken from its intended path. But something held him back. Something told him to wait. To watch. The constructs began their final approach. In 3 seconds, they would attack. In 5 seconds, every cadet in that corridor would be dead. Ava lifted her head. She opened her mouth, and she spoke. The words were quiet, almost gentle. They came out soft and calm, like a mother speaking to a frightened child. They were not shouted. They were not screamed. They carried no anger, no desperation, no fear. She said, "We don't leave our children behind." 7 words. That was all, but the effect was immediate and absolute. Every living being in that corridor froze. The construct stopped mid-step, their mechanical bodies locked in place. Briss stopped breathing. The other cadets went rigid, their eyes wide with something that looked like terror up in the observation deck. Galeth felt his blood turn to it was not the words themselves. Words were just sounds, vibrations in the air. It was something underneath them, something that Ava's voice carried without her seeming to try. A wait, a promise, a warning that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to the most ancient parts of the brain. Galeth was Morvani. His species had evolved as prey animals millions of years ago, hunted by pack predators across the plains of their homeworld. They had survived by learning to recognize danger. Their instincts were sharp and deep. Those instincts were screaming now. Ava Delgado was a predator, not the kind that killed for food or territory. Something worse, something older, a creature that chose its targets and never, ever stopped until those targets were no longer a threat. The constructs sensed it too. They were just machines, programs designed to simulate the swarm, but even they seemed to hesitate. Even they recognized what stood before them. Then the simulation crashed. The constructs flickered and vanished. The red emergency lights turned white. A calm, automated voice announced, "Simulation terminated. Xenothreat anomaly detected." All cadets returned to barracks for debriefing. Briss let out a breath she had been holding for too long. She looked at Ava with new eyes, seeing her human friend as if for the first time. What was that?" Ava did not answer. She simply adjusted the Minari child in her arms and began walking toward the evacuation point. Her face showed nothing. Her steps were steady and calm. The other cadets followed her in silence. In the observation deck, Galeth collapsed back into his chair. His hands were shaking. He had not felt this kind of fear since he was a child. Hiding from night hunters in the tall grass of his homeworld, one of the junior instructors approached him. "Sir, what happened? Why did the simulation crash?" Galeth stared at the display, showing Ava's calm face. The AI flagged her as a xenothreat. It calculated that she presented a danger level beyond the simulation's parameters. A danger? She's one cadet. She doesn't even carry a weapon anymore. She doesn't need one. Galeth pulled up Ava's file and began typing notes with trembling fingers. "That human is a weapon herself. Her voice, did you feel it?" The junior instructor looked uncomfortable. "I felt something, like cold water down my spine, like something was watching me from the dark." "That was fear," Galeth said quietly. "Real fear. The kind our ancestors felt when they knew a predator was close. When they knew they could not escape. When they knew that running was pointless because the thing hunting them would never stop. But she wasn't hunting anyone. She was protecting a child." Galeth nodded slowly. "Yes, and that is what makes it so much worse." He looked at his junior, trying to find words for what he now understood. "We have seen human aggression before. We have seen them fight, kill, destroy. That is manageable. That is familiar. But this is different. This is a human who will never stop protecting what she considers hers. Never. She will walk through fire. She will face armies. She will die and keep moving. That's impossible. For us, yes. For humans." Galeth shook his head. "They are persistence predators. Their ancestors hunted by chasing prey until the prey died of exhaustion. They do not stop. They do not give up. And when they decide something belongs to them, when they decide someone is theirs to protect." He pulled up a new file. A classification request. The highest level of security the Coalition possessed. "What are you doing?" the junior instructor asked. "My job," Galeth said quietly. "I am reporting a galaxy-level threat." On the screen, Ava Delgado walked out of the simulation area, carrying a holographic child that she had risked everything to save. She had spoken once, and the instructors would never forget it. Within 1 hour of the simulation's end, Ava Delgado's file was flagged at the highest level of Coalition security. Within 2 hours, the Academy's 3 senior instructors convened an emergency session that had not been called in 200 years. They met in a room with no windows, deep in the heart of station threshold. The walls were lined with sound dampeners. The door required 3 separate biological signatures to open. Nothing said here would ever leave this room. Galeth was the youngest of the 3, despite his 4 centuries. He sat across from Instructor Meleth, an ancient Veraci whose crystalline body had seen the fall of empires, and Instructor Dran, a Gorith warrior whose species had once conquered half the galaxy before joining the Coalition in peace. "Play it again," Meleth said. Her voice was like wind chimes in a storm. Galeth activated the display. They watched Ava speak those 7 words for the 20th time. They watched the constructs freeze. They watched the other cadets react. "Biometric readings," Dran demanded. His voice was deep as thunder. Galeth pulled up the data. Every living being in that corridor experienced a sudden spike in fear response. Heart rates doubled. Stress hormones flooded their systems. 3 cadets nearly lost consciousness. "The Keleth," Meleth observed. She was closest. "Her readings are off the scale." "Briss. She's Ava's bunkmate. They're close." Galeth hesitated. She was more affected than anyone else. Because she was closer to the source, Dran said. Like standing next to an explosion. Melith leaned forward, her crystal facets catching the light. I have lived for 1100 years. I have seen plagues that killed billions. I have seen wars that burned worlds to ash. I have never felt afraid. She paused. When I watched that recording, I felt afraid. Silence filled the room. What is she? Dran asked finally. Some kind of psychic? A telepath? No. Galith shook his head. Humans have no psychic abilities. Their brains are entirely biological. No quantum elements. No psionic structures. What Ava did was not supernatural. It was natural. Explain. Galith took a deep breath. Humans evolved on a world called Earth. It's a death world by coalition standards. Extreme temperature variations. Constant natural disasters. Predators everywhere. Most species would not survive a single day there. We know this, Dran said impatiently. What you may not know is how humans survived. Galith pulled up an image of early human hunters. They developed something called persistence hunting. They would choose prey and chase it. Not quickly, slowly, steadily, for hours, sometimes days. The prey would run, hide, rest. But the humans would always appear again, always following, never stopping. Eventually, the prey would collapse from exhaustion, and the humans would walk up and kill it without effort. Melith's crystal body flickered. That is disturbing. It gets worse, Galith continued. Over millions of years, this hunting style became part of human psychology. They developed something their scientists call determination. Once a human decides to do something, they do not stop. They cannot stop. It is written into their biology. But Ava wasn't hunting anyone, Dran protested. She was protecting a child. Exactly. Galith met their eyes one by one. The same persistence that makes humans unstoppable hunters also makes them unstoppable protectors. When a human decides that something belongs to them, when they decide that someone is part of their pack, they will do anything to keep that person safe. Anything. He pulled up another display. This one showed brain scans. When Ava spoke, her voice carried subharmonic frequencies that triggered fear responses in every species present. Not because she was threatening them, because her body was broadcasting a message that every prey species in the galaxy has evolved to understand. What message? Melith asked. I am hunting something. I will never stop. Nothing you do will save the thing I am protecting. Run or die. The room went very quiet. Dran broke the silence. She was protecting a hologram. A simulation of a child. It wasn't even real. To her, it was real. Galith's voice was soft. Humans do not distinguish between practice and reality when it comes to protection. If she could walk away from a fake child, she might walk away from a real one. So she treats every child as real, every threat as genuine, every moment as life or death. Melith made a sound like glass breaking. So she is what? A weapon? A monster? Neither. Galith shook his head. She is a protector, the most dangerous kind, the kind that will never stop, never surrender, never accept failure, the kind that makes enemies afraid simply by existing. What do we do with her? Dran asked. Galith had thought about this for hours. He had considered every option. Discharge her. Lock her away. Use her as a weapon. Nothing felt right. Then he had remembered something his own instructor had told him centuries ago. We give her a purpose, he said. We point her at the things that need protecting and let her do what she was born to do. He created a new file, a new classification, one that had never existed before. Galaxy-level threat, he typed. Then he added 2 more words, protective designation. Melith read it and made her glass-breaking sound again. You want to classify her as a weapon of mass protection? I want to classify her as what she is, Galith replied. The most dedicated guardian the galaxy has ever seen. The question is not whether she is dangerous. She is. The question is whether we want her dangerous on our side. He looked at his fellow instructors. I know my answer. What is yours? They sent Galith to speak with her, not because he was the most senior instructor, not because he had the most experience with humans. They sent him because he was the only one willing to sit across from a galaxy-level threat and ask her a simple question. Why had she been silent? He found her in the academy gardens, a small green space where cadets could rest between training sessions. She sat alone on a bench, watching the artificial sunset paint the dome above in shades of orange and pink. She did not look surprised to see him. Galeth sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was comfortable, like a blanket wrapped around them both. Finally, he said, "May I ask you something?" She nodded. "Why did you never speak before today?" Ava turned to look at him. Her eyes were brown, ordinary by human standards, but there was something deep in them, something ancient and patient, something that had seen too much and decided to keep seeing anyway. She pulled out her tablet and typed. He waited. "I learned early that my words have weight," she wrote. "I don't always understand why." "What do you mean?" She typed again. "I worked in crisis negotiation on Earth. I talked people down from violence. I calmed crowds. I convinced killers to surrender." A pause. More typing. "But sometimes when I spoke, I scared people. Even when I was trying to help. Even when I meant no harm. Something in my voice made them afraid." Galeth felt a chill run down his spine. "So you stopped speaking?" "I stopped speaking carelessly," she corrected via tablet. "When I joined the academy, I decided to prove myself through actions. I didn't want to scare my new allies. I wanted them to trust me first." "And do they trust you now?" For the first time since he met her, Ava smiled. It was a small expression, barely visible, but it transformed her face. "Briss came back for me," she typed. "They all came back. That's trust." Galeth nodded slowly. He understood now. Ava had spent 6 months building relationships through deeds alone, showing her squad who she was without the complication of her voice. When she finally spoke, her words landed on prepared ground. "May I ask about the simulation?" He ventured. She nodded. "Why did you go back with the child? You knew it was hopeless. You knew the tactical choice was to leave it behind. Why risk everything for a hologram?" Ava's fingers paused over the tablet. She looked out at the artificial sunset for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. Then she typed 3 words. "It was a child. It was a simulation." Galeth pressed gently. "A test. Not real." Ava turned to face him fully. She did not reach for her tablet. Instead, she opened her mouth and spoke for the second time since the simulation. "If I can walk away from a child in training, I can walk away from a child in battle. I won't practice abandonment." Her voice was soft, calm, but Galeth felt that same cold weight settle over him, that same ancient warning that had frozen constructs and terrified cadets. He forced himself to stay still, to meet her eyes, to not run. "You understand what you are, don't you?" he asked quietly. "I know I'm different," she replied, still speaking aloud. "I know my voice does something to people. I don't know why. I don't know how to stop it. Do you want to stop it?" She considered the question carefully. "No, I want to control it. I want to use it to protect people, not scare them." Galeth reached into his pocket and pulled out a small data chip. "The instructors have discussed your case. You've been given a new classification. Let me guess. Danger to myself and others. Recommend immediate discharge. Galaxy-level threat, protective designation." He handed her the chip. "It's a new category. We created it just for you." Ava stared at the chip in her palm. "What does that mean?" "It means we recognize what you are. A predator. A hunter. Something that evolved to chase and to protect with equal intensity." Galeth paused. "It means we want you on our side. And if I don't want to be a weapon, then don't be." Galeth stood up, brushing off his uniform. "Be a shield instead. Be the thing that stands between the galaxy's children and the darkness that wants to hurt them. Be what you were born to be." Ava looked up at him. In the artificial sunset light, her ordinary brown eyes seemed to glow with something ancient and fierce. "And if I fail? If I can't control it, then we'll deal with that together," Galeth said simply. "That's what the Coalition does. We face threats together. We protect each other." He paused. "Even from ourselves." Ava was silent for a long moment. Then she stood up and held out her hand in the human gesture of agreement. "I have one condition," she said. "Name it." "I want to keep serving. I want to finish my training. I want to graduate with my squad." She met his eyes directly. "Can I still do that?" Galeth took her hand and shook it firmly, ignoring the primal fear that screamed at him to run. "Cadet Delgado," he said. I wouldn't have it any other way. 3 months later, Ava Delgado stood on the graduation stage and received her commission. She was first in her class. She was also, technically, the only cadet in Academy history to be classified as a weapon of mass protection. The other graduates gave her space as she walked to receive her badge, but it was not fear that kept them distant anymore. It was respect. Briss stood in the front row, all four arms crossed proudly over her chest. She had graduated third in the class, just behind a Gorath warrior who had trained for 20 years before joining the academy. When Ava's name was called, Briss cheered louder than anyone else. "That's my human," she shouted. "That's my pack leader." The word had spread through the academy in the weeks following the simulation. Pack. It was what Ava's squad called themselves now. 8 cadets from 8 different species, bound together by something stronger than duty or friendship. They had followed her into darkness. They had come back for her when logic said to run. And in return, she had given them something precious. She had given them certainty. When you were part of Ava's pack, you knew one thing absolutely. She would never leave you behind. Never. No matter what. After the ceremony, Galeth found Ava in the crowd. She was surrounded by her pack, laughing silently at something Briss had said. Even now, she rarely spoke aloud. Her voice was a weapon, and she treated it with the same care a soldier treated a loaded gun. "Congratulations, Lieutenant Delgado," he said formally. She nodded in thanks. "Your assignment has come through." He handed her a sealed folder. "First Contact Division. You'll be the Coalition's voice to new species." Briss's eyes went wide. "First Contact? That's the most dangerous posting in the fleet." "Exactly," Galeth said. He met Ava's eyes. "The Coalition has decided that if a new species can handle you, they can handle anything. And if they can't, better to know immediately." Ava finished quietly. "Yes." She opened the folder and read the contents. Her expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. Purpose. Determination. The same look she had worn before walking back into the simulation to save a holographic child. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow. A survey team has been captured by a new species on the edge of Coalition space. The Drenari. Territorial. Aggressive. They've refused all communication attempts." "How many of our people?" 12. Ava closed the folder. "I'll bring them home." It was not a promise. It was not a hope. It was a fact, stated as simply as the color of the sky or the heat of a star. The next day, Ava walked into a Drenari camp alone. The Drenari were massive creatures, 3 meters tall with armored hides and claws that could tear through steel. They had surrounded the captured survey team with weapons and warriors, certain that no rescue would be possible. They did not understand humans. Ava approached their leader, a scarred old warrior named Keth who had killed dozens of enemies in territorial disputes. He looked at this small, soft creature walking toward him without weapons or armor and felt something he had never felt before. Unease. There was something wrong about her. Something that made his ancient instincts scream warnings. She moved like a predator, slow and steady and absolutely certain. Her eyes never blinked. Her steps never faltered. She stopped 3 meters from him and spoke. "I'm here to bring my people home," she said. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. "You can help me, or you can watch me do it anyway." Keth's warriors shifted nervously. They felt it too. That cold weight. That ancient warning. The knowledge that something stood before them that would not stop, could not stop, would never stop until it got what it wanted. Keth had conquered a dozen worlds. He had faced enemies that breathed fire and enemies that lived in vacuum. He had never retreated from a fight in his life that he looked at Ava Delgado and saw his death. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, if he fought her, if he harmed her people, she would come for him. She would follow him across the galaxy, if necessary. She would chase him until one of them was dead, and she would not be the one to tie her first. "Take them," he growled. "Take your people and go." Ava nodded once. She walked past him to the prisoners, untying them with calm, efficient movements. The survey team stared at her with a mixture of awe and fear. "Who are you?" one of them whispered. "Lieutenant Ava Delgado," she replied. "Coalition, First Contact Division. Let's go home." She led them out of the camp without looking back. The Drenari watched her go, their weapons forgotten in their claws. They had just learned something that would spread across their entire civilization within days. Humans were not prey. Humans were not predators. Humans were something far more dangerous. They were protectors. And when a human decided you belonged to them, when a human decided you were part of their pack, nothing in the galaxy could take you away. Galith received the mission report 3 days later. 12 survivors. 0 casualties. The Drenari had requested formal diplomatic talks. He smiled and added a note to Ava's file. Subject continues to exceed expectations. Recommend expansion of First Contact Division to include additional human personnel. Note: the galaxy is learning what happens when you threaten a human's pack. He paused, then added one final line. They are learning to be afraid.